division twice, home and home? Do we stick with the current model where there's a crossover? And I don't know. The concern with that is it's not equal. So, for instance, this year we played 3 of the 4 teams from the other division that made the postseason from the other side, whereas other teams only played 2 teams that made it, and we played 3 of the toughest teams. And so it's, is the schedule now equitable? And so there's the nice part is the group of coaches on the men's side anyway. That's what I work with. We've had some really good discussions and conversations to talk about what we want this to look like. So it's not just, we're able to have a say in it, which is important. And, it makes the conference kind of our own, which is nice.
Yeah. You know who has similar size, I don't want to say issues, but where the scheduling they trying to fit is the ODAC. They have 13 or something, and they only play 8 teams every year or some craziness.
It's funny you bring them up because I actually use them as my example of if we want to stay with the crossover model. I'm just plugging in here. I think I'm good, but I don't want to not be good. They structure it so if you finish in last place, you don't play the team that wins the conference. Like they try to allow teams from the bottom to move up with this, and people are like, well, we don't have the algorithm that they use. I was like, I bet if somebody calls their conference office, they'll probably share it.
It's not
which because they got it from the ACC. So, it's not like it's proprietary information. That we have to keep secret. It's let's share this and make it better for everybody. So I don't know what we're going to do in the long run here. I am pretty active within the coaches group, but at the end of the day, we only have so much say in things.
Well, I think you're definitely going to, once you have 14 teams, you definitely have to come up with something that
we're going to have to change something.
Something's going to have to make sense somewhere. Even if you do like 2 conferences, two divisions, of 7, the top 3 in each, then go into some tournament or 4, whatever it is,
And that's what we're talking about. We also talked about adopting, if we play everybody, almost adopting what the UAA does, which I don't really want to do. I like the playoff format, but we'll see what happens.
All right, so really quick, rules of the road. As you can tell, there are no rules. We'll just keep talking. The script is more for me. I will, if I think, I'll just try to knock off some things. Just to keep the conversation going. And then you go where you want, man. Whatever inspires you go there. And I'm not going to stop you and be like, oh, that's off topic. No, I don't. We talk for as long as.
I'll try to keep my answers somewhat succinct and not get off on crazy tangents. But my wife tells me constantly, you have a problem. You talk too much.
That's okay. This is the platform to talk too much.
That's what I told her. I'm like, I get to talk about myself and my program, and she's like, oh my God, you're never coming home. I'm like, probably not.
Well, at some point I'll cut it off because I do. I am home, but no, I seriously, I think the longest one I've done is like an hour and 45 minutes. So
okay,
I am. It goes. So and then last. Just so you know, at the very end, we'll do some sort of sign off. Hey, goodbye, thanks for coming. If you remember, don't sign off. Just stay on because the way this software works is it's recording locally on your computer, and so I just have to make sure that it's completely uploaded. On your side, because then they marry the two together, and that's how it works. But
got it.
And otherwise, it's a headache.
Okay.
But otherwise, if you're ready to roll, I've been recording, so I might take that snip at the beginning and sort of figure it out to throw
by all means.
So
whatever you want to throw out there is.
maybe this becomes like the behind the scenes look of how it works, and just
this is what we really talk about.
Yeah. What do we talk about when we're not recording? Oh, look,
right.
We're talking about soccer.
Yeah. Funny, nothing really changed.
Yeah. All right, so if you're good, I'll just pause for a second where I know where if I decide to break it, and then we'll just get rolling.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Good. All right, Coach. Thanks for joining me today on this Simple Coach to Coach interview. Do appreciate you taking the time to meet with me. I'm sure you're gearing up for a fall that is coming right around the corner. But thank you. Just really, really do appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. I'm excited to do this.
So, all right. So, you've been at SUNY Canton, which, by the way, I am so glad we connected because it's helped me learn a whole other region of schools that I really hadn't tapped into. But you've been at SUNY Canton since 2013.
Yep.
Maybe you've had your success. Can you just talk about sort of how you ended up there and sort of what your journey's been like?
Yeah, I attended and played at Juniata College in Pennsylvania. So I was there from 2003 to 2007. Had the pleasure of playing against the national champions in conference play for 3 of the 4 years I was there. I think I only gave up 3 goals as a goalkeeper over those games to them, which was great. And not many goalkeepers could say that, but
that's true.
It was a pretty cool experience for me down there. I played for Scott McKenzie, who's now an associate AD there. And then after I graduated, I actually got right into a head coaching position at Southern Vermont College, which unfortunately closed its doors a couple years ago. I was there from 2007 to 2013 when I came to Canton, and had some success while I was there, taking that program from sort of the total rebuild and making us competitive within the region. Went to a couple conference championships with them, and then, like I said, came to Canton in 2013 as the school was finishing its transition to full NCAA Division III membership. And then went through the growing pains of joining a conference, having operated for a couple years as an independent. And now here we are, 10 years in, or started the 10th year this fall, and really excited about it.
Yeah. You had mentioned this earlier, that somebody might have heard or not, that you were a 2-year school up until that point when you transitioned, when you were talking about transitioning to Division 3?
Canton was a 2-year school up until the early 2000s. And then they became a 4-year institution, and they actually joined the NAIA for a while. And then after a few years in the NAIA, discovered that wasn't the path that was going to sustain their growth from an athletic standpoint. And so the school is set up, it really fits the Division III model, I think, with the emphasis being on the student-athlete experience. And so that transition started, and it's normally a 4-year process. We were able to do it in 3 here.
Yeah, wow. Just keeping you busy off the field. That's why I always say that sort of stuff, right?
Yes.
Hey, let me ask you, since you've been doing this for a while, and obviously playing at Juniata and seeing some really talented players at Messiah, Do you think players have changed, like in that since you were playing? Like, have they gotten better? Are they different, or are they still the same knuckleheads that we all were at some point?
I was never a knucklehead. I have no idea what you're talking about.
I was a goalie.
There.
Yes, you were.
I 100% was. But no, I think that there have been changes in players. I think that the level they're playing at before they come to college has gotten higher. There's been more opportunities for players to play at a higher level. But I think at the end of the day, the kids that are ultimately the most successful when they get to this level, they haven't changed from their desire, their drive, their passion for playing, and their ultimate goal of competing, I think, has largely stayed the same. I think that we are running into issues where there are kids who, they drive to compete for so long at the high school and club levels that they get burnt out a little bit more quickly. I do think that, if this is stealing from something later on in your questions, but I think kids are being pressured too much to specialize too early. This concept that at 11, 12 years old, they need to only play one sport, I think is kind of crazy. Yeah. I'm not saying it doesn't work in some cases, but there was as I digress already, as I promised I wouldn't.
Go!
Ray Reed and Ralph Perez started a podcast. Since Ray's got some spare time now that he's retired, and I worked camps for him for a number of years, and I've met Ralph a couple of times. They had Taylor Twellman on the other day, and I do not really care for Taylor Twellman in the grand scheme of things. But he talked about growing up, how he had his soccer friends, he had his basketball friends, and he had his baseball friends, and how each group helped mold him into the soccer player he became. And he talked about, the basketball group probably having the biggest impact with him. And he was a very good basketball player. He was potentially a scholarship level basketball player. But he talked about growing up playing on playgrounds and having to hold your own and fight for every inch because that was the only way you could stay on. Yeah. And he talked about being kind of an undersized kid that if he didn't fight, he was just going to get kicked out.
Yeah.
And he credits that experience to what helped him on the soccer field. And so I think there's value in kids differentiating what they do. I just had a recruit on campus right before this, and he and his dad were talking to me about maybe switching clubs or maybe not playing club soccer next year. And I asked him, I said, well, what's your end goal in playing club? He's like, well, I want to be able to be seen by college coaches, which he's done. And I want to be able to be playing at a high level so I'm ready when I go to college. And I said, well, does your high school provide you that? And he's like, not really. I'm like, well, then I think you really should consider the club path, but make sure it's the club that gets you what you want, not the club that says they're going to do certain things. Like, actually talk to players in the club. And, if your high school offers you other sports that you want to play in, can you still do both? Yeah. That matters. If players changed maybe a little bit, I think, again, they're a little bit better prepared. I know I wasn't as tactically prepared as I needed to be as a goalkeeper when I went to college, and I think that would be different now. There's simply just better opportunities for kids to learn more.
Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned the burnout, because no one's really talked about that so far in my however many coaches I've talked to. And it is very true. I see it on my kids' teams. Kids who are super talented athletes, great soccer players, and they're kind of sick of it. They're sick of, I don't want to lump it all together, but it's almost like an unkind, unfriendly atmosphere, the club atmosphere, because there's not,
It can be.
It can, exactly. Let me clarify.
It's finding the clubs that are selling. What is the club selling? Are they selling your student athletes' development?
Yeah.
Physically, as a person, mentally. Yeah. Are they saying, no, we're a club and we're a business and we need kids to make money? Yeah. That's where it gets dicey. Yeah. And I think it's all about finding. It's no different than your college search. It's finding the right college that's the right fit for you. It's the same thing with club. Now, in some cases, there might only be one or two clubs in your area, so you might not get as much say in that. But I think in many cases, there are negatives surrounding club organizations. And I think for us as coaches, it really is about the relationship we have with some of these clubs. But we find ourselves going back to the same clubs because we have good relationships and they're turning out
good players,
good kids.
Yeah. I didn't mean to. Like I said, I wasn't lumping everybody, but it can be a very unkind, unfriendly place, especially the way clubs are. I'll just say in New Jersey that there's tons of clubs, right? And they're competing for the same players, and then they want to be the best, and it's sort of they drive the kids intentionally or unintentionally, right? It's just the nature of. And I think I see a lot of kids just after a while, like, you know what, this is just not my cup of tea. What sort of player do you look for? Like, what's a profile of a player that would go to SUNY Canton and play for you? Aside from being a good soccer player, right?
I mean, one of the first things we look at is, the type of student they are in the academic program that they want. And we still get them. The kid, hey, coach, I'm really interested in your school. I can't wait to be a neurosurgeon when I grow up. And we have no biomedical science-related programs whatsoever. But we look for kids who have an interest in some of the engineering technologies or sports management. We have a ridiculously good criminal investigation, criminal justice field here with a number of different programs in it. And part of that is, getting to know kids and getting to learn about their learning styles. Our school takes a very hands-on approach to the academic side of things. So they have textbooks and they're reading about theory, but it's all about practical implementation for our kids. So finding kids that are gonna flourish and thrive in that type of environment is really important. So for us as a staff, we have to engage with kids a lot early to determine those things, because you're not going to get that through text messages or through emails. We want kids that want to come in, that want to compete, that they want to, whether it's for playing time or competing for a conference title or whatever it is, but having that competitive edge is important, but not having it to the point where winning is everything. That, we had a young man on the team recently who in our spring games was throwing a fit because an official didn't call a very questionable handball in a game that literally, and I'm like, pumped. He's like, but we have to win. I'm like, it's a spring game. We're trying to develop our younger players here and get them experience, and you're just going crazy here. Like, no, that's not. And some of those things you don't know until kids come into your program, certainly. But we want kids that are coachable, that are willing to step outside their comfort zone. That and I think probably almost every coach you talk to, there'll be kids that they recruit that may not play the same position when they get to college. And we had a kid at our ID clinic that we ran a couple months ago who he was a forward, and I asked him to play outside back for a little bit at the ID clinic. And he's like, you want me to play where? It's like, okay, that answered so many questions for me. And that's not to say that it makes him a bad player or a bad person, but that lack of flexibility in that moment, that's telling to us as a coach. And for kids that are out there that watch this or pick up any of this, you're always being assessed. And your attitude to something like that sometimes it may be a test, and this wasn't. I needed the kid to play outside back. But, coaches can throw that out there, and what your response is matters.
Yeah, very true, very true. Again, you mentioned it earlier about kids being specialists in positions and whatnot. That's the wrong. I think it's obviously goalkeeper's a different story, but
correct.
Any other field player, man, you should be like, yep, I just want to play. That kind of attitude gets you a long way. Long way.
Kids will come and say, hey, I would love to play here, but I'll do what I can in this spot. If this is where you need me to play, like, those are the kids that we're really after.
Hey, you talked a little bit about sort of the transition to D3 from NAI, and I mean, it's kind of a tumultuous time. I'm just curious, like, how long before it sort of settled and you think, and maybe you're not there yet, where you thought your program, the program that you've sort of built, is where you want it to be, or at least on the right tracks, right, and heading in the right direction?
Yeah, I think, it's always difficult when you take over a program in any type of setting. I was following a coach that was very well liked, that had had a good bit of success, and he's continued to be successful after here. Mark Howlett, who he went from here to Buffalo State, and he's now at SUNY Geneseo. And I inherited a number of his players, and Mark and I run things very differently. We're just different people. And there was an adjustment period for a lot of those guys, and some of them, it took them a little bit to understand that just because it was different, it didn't mean it was bad. I think about 3 years in, though, for me, we really had guys bought into the direction we were heading and what we were trying to build. COVID hurt us in some ways. It helped us in other ways. The reality is it just kind of made things more chaotic. With kids having a fifth year, and some of them utilizing it, some not utilizing it, some making very last-minute decisions to use it, and that influencing things. But no, I mean, it certainly took a couple of years, and I think for me, I had gone to a private college, I had worked at a private college, so understanding the adjustments of being in a state system, that was a big learning curve for me. And when I was in Vermont, I was recruiting all over the country. Now I'm largely, the vast majority of my kids I'm recruiting are within New York State. And that's not to say we don't go out. We have kids from North Carolina, New Jersey, Idaho. I've had kids from California, Florida. We've had international kids. But again, that's not my focus point with recruiting now. So, it took me a little bit to adjust and, make new connections within the recruiting network here. But like I said, I think within 3 years we really had guys bought in to what we were trying to do.
Just as an aside, being that you're a Juniata grad, I had a great conversation with Brendan Grady, who's I think this is his second year, if I recall. Yeah.
Yep.
Really great guy, and I think he's going to find a lot of success there.
I think he's going to do very well there. He works, and I still have a lot of connections there. And the one thing that I've been told overwhelmingly is he will grind, and he will go and he will find kids.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to be successful there, which is great to see.
And I will say, like, the facilities, at least the pictures that I've seen, are top class. Like, I'm again, it's one of those things where you're like, wow, these are, I know some other schools that would just, give their left leg for facilities like Juniata has, and the soccer stadium. I mean, it's just great to see.
Yeah, I'm not bitter that they put that in after I
graduated. Look, you have to leave for that to happen.
100%, which is always how it goes. In my first year, we didn't even play on the old field because it was being resurfaced. So we had a completely different field my freshman year, which was a little bit rough. But no, it's great to see them being able to grow and expand the way that they are. They just hired a new athletic director there who I went to college with, Nikki. And she's going to do some awesome things because if there's somebody that was passionate about that college, it was her, and I think she's going to be an awesome fit for them and really help that whole department move forward.
I have this thing now that I sort of look at is like how committed is college or a university to their athletics, and sort of what does that look like, and obviously the facilities. But then when I see folks being hired, new athletic directors or what have you, it always like, there's something going on there. I don't know what it is. I'm not on the inside, but that to me sort of raises some flags in a good way. Like, something's going on. I think they want to be more competitive, or they want to show greater commitment to their athletics.
100%.
Do you have a leadership team for your leadership team, a leadership group for your team?
Yes. Yeah. So I started doing this back when I was at Southern Vermont. I'd been at the United Soccer Coaches Convention, and one of the big points of emphasis for me as a coach that year was just learning more about leadership development. And one of the sessions I went to, and I apologize, I can't even remember who did the session now, it was many, many years ago, but they talked about developing this leadership group and being dependent on that for a number of different things, but also, helping choose your captains, but also giving players who might not be outspoken and vocal, but giving them a voice and a role within that. And so our group, it evolves a little bit every year, obviously with personnel turnover, but also what we need people to do within that group. We have one young man who he's a senior who's part of that this year, who he doesn't play a ton. He's not one of our best players, but he's coming off a pretty rough injury. And we have an incoming freshman who's coming off an ACL injury. Mm-hmm. And I've talked with him about his leadership role and his leadership voice being around helping that young man stay with the process, not be frustrated when there's setbacks in your recovery, and that's so important to have. Somebody that's gone through what you're going through. I've put kids in our leadership group who haven't always been the strongest students, that have maybe struggled and had to sit out a semester because college is just different for so many kids. And I think that a lot of freshmen are ill-equipped for the demands of being a college student. So having someone that understands, hey, I understand it's difficult when you don't have somebody looking over your shoulder telling you to get up and go to class. That's what I'm here for, because I've been where you are. So again, we try to make it practical and not just about the outspoken alpha captains. And those guys are part of the group, don't get me wrong. But like right now, I've got our guys, like once a week, I'm sending our guys a couple of different articles to have them read about leadership or overcoming adversity, and then having just sort of a generalized conversation about it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's just such a key thing, because it gives them different perspective, but it also helps prepare them to be able to support their teammates, which is what you want from your leadership group.
Yeah. So that's another area that I find really interesting as of late, because I never, when I was playing, you had like 3 captains. You didn't talk to each other. Like it was just you got the armband and you led the warm-ups, and that was sort of the model. And now it just seems like there's so much more. And I'm starting to think like that leadership group helps maintain what your program is designed to be like, and that they are the main drivers of that, and the main drivers of the continuity of your program, right? And
I think it's really important, because if you're not part of that leadership group, you hear the things your coach is saying, but you're not tied directly to the coach. There's a separation of player and coach. But when you have your teammates as that buffer or that connection, it's easier to go with them and say, hey, I don't get this. Yeah. But if your leadership group, and again, if they're in your leadership group, they need to be bought into what it is you're trying to do. Yeah. They're able to explain it in a way and build that bridge, and you get so much more out of those kids that are learning and growing within the program. Mm-hmm. And the guys that are in our leadership group, there's constant communication, but they understand, they're after the same things we are as a coaching staff. Yeah. And it makes that process a lot easier.
Yeah. Look, it's invaluable, right? When you have guys that are part of a group, within a group, that their sole purpose is to help pull folks along. Yeah. It almost guarantees, like, it takes a lot of work to let one of the kids fall through the cracks, right? Because
they have to work to do it, or they have to say, I don't care, I'm going to do this my way. But those kids, and it's funny because we find out about those kids through the leadership group, and we can have a discussion with them. And if they just say, hey, I'm not going to get on board with that, then it's, at that point we say, okay, you're welcome to try it your way, but we can tell you now you're going to get left behind.
Yeah.
And you're separating yourself out from the group.
Yep.
And we don't, by no means are we trying to take away a person's individuality. But there are certain parts of being, if you're going to be part of a team, and we don't consider ourselves a team. We consider ourselves a program and a family here.
Yeah.
And to be part of that means that, you've got to trust that the program is always looking out for your best interest, even if you might not see it in that moment.
Yeah. You mentioned this a little bit earlier. How difficult, easy, crazy was that COVID year plus for you guys up in the great north of the state of New York?
COVID was interesting. So I was on vacation in Florida, and I got a text from our women's soccer coach, and she goes, "Hey, just giving you a heads up, St. Lawrence is announcing that they're closing, and they're right across town from us." She's like, "I don't know what that means for us." And this was like the night before I was flying home. I was on vacation with my wife and kids, and we got up the next morning. We went to the airport. We got on the airplane, and it was funny because there were people on the flight home that had been on the flight south with us. We had never met them before, but one woman was a professor at Syracuse, and they were on spring break. They were on vacation, and so we land at Syracuse International Airport, and we go into baggage claim. We turn our phones on, and all of a sudden, my phone is just blowing up with voicemails, text messages, emails, and like the first one I see is SUNY Canton's closing, and I'm like, "I'm sorry, what? Wait, what?" And like I look over at her, and she's like, "Is your phone blowing up?" And I'm like, "Yeah, is yours?" And she goes, "Yeah, Syracuse is shut down." And like that was how like we were on a plane for 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And we were getting notices like, "Hey, you've got 48 hours to get to your office, get whatever you need to work from home. We're not bringing the students back from spring break." Like, and it was just like, whoa, like, what does this mean? And, are we even going to go back in the fall? And we had all these questions and, the chaos that's ensued the last 2 years. It's impacted everything that we've done. It's impacted travel. It's impacted recruiting. It's, everything that we've done. Right. But, I think we've done a good job within our school. We've managed the chaos as best as possible. At times it's been fly by the seat of your pants. Felt like there's been some making it up as we go. And it's tough because guidelines have changed. Federal guidelines, state guidelines, county guidelines, institutional guidelines. You have, 15 different departments that are supposed to be coordinating and working together, and no one's talking, so we're all trying to figure it out. But, I think in some ways we've benefited because the COVID numbers were never scarily high in St. Lawrence County. The number of deaths has been very, very low, and we were able to attract, from a recruiting perspective, I think there was an element of, hey, they stayed open. They had kids back on campus. They had a spring season. They were back to playing competitive games. We never got put on pause as a school where students got locked in their rooms for 2 weeks.
Right.
And I think a lot of, kids from farther away, especially kids from more heavily populated areas and kids from Long Island, New York City, Albany, Syracuse, Rochester, Buffalo, they're like, hey, they've found a way to make this work there. And that's been to our benefit. And it's, from a recruiting standpoint, I've had to talk about those things because they're concerns that families rightfully so have. But being able to say, hey, we've not been put on lockdown. We haven't had to suspend things for 2 weeks and go online. Our cases have been down across campus. I think at one point we had a spike where we had 1 week where we had over 20 new cases on campus, and that's it.
Yeah.
Which compared to other schools,
that's
you've seen schools that had over 400 cases in a week. Like we've been able to mitigate that, and I think that speaks well to the students as well, that have managed some of their social behaviors, as we'll call them. Yeah. They've bought in, though, and our guys have been great within our team. I've told them, like, hey, if you guys go out and do those things, you're risking shutting not only our program, but the entire athletic department down. Yeah. Do you want to be responsible for that?
Do you want to be that guy?
Right, and they've been great. They've responded, and, I'm very proud of them for that. I don't think that, across all these colleges that have managed to stay open, I think the students do deserve to be applauded because college experience changed very, very drastically over the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Hey, one of the impacts, you mentioned it earlier, you mentioned it earlier about, like super seniors or grad students that they have the extra year of eligibility. Did that impact you at all? Did you have some guys who stayed?
Yep.
Did they have the option to stay?
Yeah, so once we found out that extra year was going to be granted, and we knew we had a couple of kids that were likely going to need it, we had those discussions with them. Originally last year, we were supposed to have a graduating class of 7. I ended up with a graduating class of 12. I had 3 kids come back for a 5th year, and then I also had 2 kids who graduated early. Which, again, that's awesome. That's wonderful to have. I have a kid this year who he came to college with 71 college credits. Oh, wow. So he started as a sophomore.
Nice.
And he will be able to graduate this year, and he'll have 2 years left.
Yeah.
If he wants to go to another school.
Yeah.
And most grad students, they only have 1 year left when they go. Yeah. I was like, you've just made yourself marketable to so many programs because they get 2 years with you.
Yeah.
And that's not the norm. So yeah, we have a couple of kids this year. I have one that's definitely going to be taking advantage of it. I have one other that probably will, and one that might. I don't think the third one will. But then after that, we're going to have other kids that may take advantage of it because it's there. And if not, if I can help them go somewhere and work on their master's degree and continue playing, hopefully not against somebody I play against in conference play, that's awesome. That's just enhancing their experience, which I think is really important.
Does SUNY Canton not offer grad?
We don't have master's programs at this time, unfortunately. So any kids I get for a 5th year are, maybe they fell behind early, or they transferred in, or they're doing a second major, which we do have some dual major kids.
Hey, have you been seeing when you're recruiting? Do you experience this D1 or bust mentality that seems to be the thing?
It's out there. I mean, there's absolutely no denying its existence. I think it's a mixed bag. I think if you're playing for an MLS Next, MLS Academy, ECNL a little bit, that's the mindset. And it's unfortunate because, and you know this from what you're doing here, and you've been following the D3 game, and I know that, I played against kids when I was in college. We played Messiah, Elizabethtown, Case Western, Carnegie Mellon. I played against Kai Casiguran when he was with Messiah, and oh my gosh, you want to talk about a kid who could have played D1 soccer. Dustin Schambach was the goalkeeper for Messiah at that point, and he still holds most of the goalkeeping records there. There's kids that could have been playing, that were scholarship level kids. There's kids playing at Tufts and Amherst and Conn and Messiah still, and a lot of these other schools. There's absolutely kids that are scholarship level players. And they were smart enough. I shouldn't say every kid that goes D1. I'm not trying to say they're stupid. For some kids, that scholarship is what allows them to go to college, and that's great. And good for them for earning that. But for kids who want to do something else, be part of something else, good for them for recognizing the opportunity that D3 provides.
Yeah.
But part of it's what gets pushed on them. I grew up in an area of New York where there was, to this day, there has been one Division I athlete coming out of my high school. And he played football at the University of Maryland, and he was set to be drafted until he tore his ACL for a third time. But most people, when I was growing up, it was, well, if you're not playing for Syracuse, which was right in our backyard,
Right.
you're not going to Syracuse or Duke or UNC, like, there's nothing else out there. And I was fortunate. I played for a coach who his son went to a Division III. And we started gaining some traction with getting kids to recognize there's other opportunities out there, and it doesn't have to be D1 or bust. Because let's be honest, what it takes to be a D1 athlete is a very special thing. It takes a lot to achieve to earn the right to be a D1 athlete. But that's not to say that you're not a gifted athlete if you're playing D3, D2, NAIA, JUCO, whatever. Like, you can still be a very gifted athlete.
Yeah.
And I think, things like what you're doing here, and there's some others out there, they're starting to break that myth.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what's the messaging being given to the kid?
Yeah.
What's the high school coach telling them? What's the club coach telling them? What are the parents telling them?
Yeah.
And that plays such a huge role. And I think you've seen the D3s. Like, we do a really good job now, I think, of promoting our kids when we release them as part of the incoming class. It used to be that was only a D1 thing.
Yeah.
And now kids are getting a lot of some of what they want in those D1 experiences.
Yeah.
They're realizing, oh, wow, I get that at D3.
Yeah.
I get the live broadcast of my games. I get to compete nationally or whatever it is. And there's recognition in that. And I think just as importantly, you get a quality degree. And you get to go out and say, sorry, my office lights just went off on me. You get to go out and say, though, to future employers, hey, I was part of a team in college. And I know what it takes to be part of a successful team. And that makes me different than somebody that didn't do that. So I think people are coming around to, it's not D1 or bust, but it's all in the messaging that goes to the student themselves.
Yeah. That's it. I always point to Montclair as an example. They have some kids that came from Division I.
Yep.
But who I watch and I'm like, they could have gone to another Division I school and
100%.
But I look, you look at Connecticut, you could look at Tufts, you could go down the list of. I'm amazed at some of these guys, and to me, like you said, I just think it ends up being an experience. Like, the commitment that you need at the Division I level might just be too much to someone who has other interests, right? Like, I want to explore some different things, and that's what this spring is for. Largely,
well, if you want to study abroad,
you want to go abroad.
A lot of D1 schools won't let you do that.
Yeah.
What if you need a job to help pay for your tuition? No, you've got gym, lift it, whatever. And it's I'm not taking away from what some of these D1 schools are doing. A lot of them, they're trying to turn out pro athletes.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
But if you go the D1 route, so many times your college experience isn't your own.
Yeah.
No, some it is.
Yeah.
But, I know firsthand from having worked camps with some of these guys and been around them, some of them are coaching now, like, they had no say in what classes they took or, when they took classes.
Yeah.
And when, things that they wanted to do. No, you don't have that free time.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, it's about the experience that you're after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also think that, especially as folks, I think there's this impression that of Division I that, basically there's only 5-10 schools that have this real professional environment, but they think because it's Division I, doesn't matter, right? Like everyone thinks that these schools are Maryland or UNC, and the truth of the matter is that's not the case, right? Like it's
right.
But anyhow, hey, I'm sure you've heard the overtime rule changes and
yes.
Season. Do you have any thoughts on those? Are they going to change the way you approach a game during the season, or? So
I'm all for. I actually put in my comments when we had the comment period for coaches. I mentioned in my comments, which who knows if they were ever actually read, but I said I thought that no overtime for non-conference games was awesome.
Yeah,
like we're already in we're in a 2-month period that we're playing 18 games. It's a lot.
Yeah.
And now we're extending that by, overtime, and in some case, like, what happens if you have overtime and you're playing a back-to-back weekend? Like, that's just, and not every school has 30 capable players on their roster.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can make the point, well, that means you just need to recruit more, you need to be better. But like, some schools just don't resource themselves in a way that they can carry that.
Yeah.
And you have to have kids that are bought in to being in that type of setting. It's tough. I like the change with no overtime for regular season. It makes things a little bit more interesting within conference play. Like, okay, do you settle for a draw, or do you try and go for it? That brings up some interesting strategic questions. I'm on the fence right now about the no golden goal. There's something special about scoring a golden goal, and what that does, the reaction from your players and the experience that creates. We talk about at this level where it's an experience and about teaching kids, and the experience that you get when you give up the golden goal off of one little mistake, and the importance of attention to detail. I think there's a tremendous life lesson in that.
Yeah.
But I think there's also something to be said for you play it out all the extra time, and it gives everybody, a fair chance. I mean, look at like what everybody was complaining about with the NFL and their overtime rules.
Yeah.
Like you lose a coin toss and you don't get a chance.
Yeah.
And again, football's a very different beast, but I think that it does. It can level the playing field. It can hurt. It'll be interesting to see how the playing things out component goes.
Right.
But in the grand scheme of things, I am in favor of cutting down on the overtime in the regular season. I do think, doing it where it was just conference play would have been a good spot to start. But hey, this is what the powers that be decide.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with it. Just from, again, we talk about burnout, and I think one of the areas that is still grossly under-addressed across the board is student-athlete well-being.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, but playing back-to-back, and I know this is something that they're talking about with the NCAA tournament and everything, playing back-to-back is not good. It's not healthy. It's simply not. With what we're asking these kids to do, and I don't care this is what we've always done. That doesn't make it right.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think Division III is set up to go the model that the Division I guys are pushing, where soccer is year-round. Like, we're not. That's never going to happen for Division III.
Never.
But
never.
I respect what the D1 guys are saying.
Right.
I think that especially we're talking about future professional players.
Yeah.
That makes sense for them. Division III, I don't think it does, but I think, we hurt ourselves in our spring season.
Yeah.
You get 15 days of practice and 1 day of competition, and coaches are trying to squeeze in 100 and 150 minutes of soccer in 1 day off of 3 days a week. No. How is this helping our student athletes?
Yeah.
So I think personally, again, you get 1 day of competition. How do you actually develop out of that? You can't fix any of the mistakes you made.
It's just a reward,
Right.
It's like, hey, you got the carrot at the end of the stick. You got the
So when I was playing in college, it was still 15 days, but you were allowed to play 3 different days.
Yeah.
So instead of playing 6 games in a day, like we played 2 50-minute games our spring play day this year. And we had 18 guys, so it basically balanced, pretty nicely, where guys played about what they would play over the course of a 90-minute game. But, I think extending spring season to even 18 days, but 2 days of competition.
Yeah.
Give these kids a chance to recover and actually learn and grow. We're talking 3 more practice dates.
Yeah.
We're not asking them to be athletes year-round. They can still do their other things. And again, I'm just a coach out here doing my thing, but man, let's talk about student athlete well-being if we're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
And and we're getting all these pushes because of the unfortunate deaths of some of these higher profile D1 athletes that have come out. But I've seen it within my own program, kids that are struggling mentally because of everything that's being asked of them.
Yeah.
And it's just not being addressed.
My biggest thing is, like, I've been saying, why don't you just, again, knowing sort of roughly how things work, but I was like, man, why don't the powers that be just sort of, hey, you're going to be able to start a week earlier, and we're going to, and I realize the complications this is for schools, and maybe even tack on an extra, week at the end. So the tournament's is gonna end later, maybe whatever it is, the middle of December rather than the first week in December, and you're gonna be able to start the 10th rather than what have you.
Yeah.
And what that time, even if it were just a week, what would that do for your calendar, right? Like, you could move 3 games, you could stretch it out, and I think that if you're really interested, the overtime to me is, you might not play an overtime. You conceivably not play an overtime game in a year. Does that give you an unfair advantage to a team that would have to play overtime? Probably not. Negligible, right?
It's funny. I told my wife about the overtime changes, and she goes, "Oh my God, I'm so happy." Because without a doubt, every year we have like 4 games in a row that'll go into overtime, and she stresses out watching, and she's like, I'm so happy you don't have to deal with that anymore. I'm like, no, you don't have to deal with that anymore. But it's sort of the running joke in our family is like, if she doesn't watch, and I'll be like, hey, she's like, how'd it go? I'll be like, oh, we went into overtime. She's like, of course you did. Like, why wouldn't you? But no, I think, if we were to able to stretch it out, if we started a week earlier and can start games a week earlier.
Exactly. Just shift the calendar.
That moves at least 2 games.
Yep.
And guess what? We have 2 weekends where we play back-to-back that we might not have to now.
Yep. Exactly.
Like,
that's it.
And again, and people will say, well, it costs more money. We're talking about the same amount of games.
Yeah.
Maybe 1 additional trip, but again, D3. If you go into the mission of Division 3 on the NCAA, it talks about student athlete experience.
Yeah.
Well, so let's actually make it about that instead of saying we're about that.
Yeah.
And I know there are people out there that are pushing for these things, and I'm very thankful for them, and I'm trying to do the small parts I can to push.
Yeah.
But it's got to be something that everybody gets bought into.
Yeah.
And it can't just be the mindset of, well, this is what we've always done, because that's the mindset that drags us backwards.
Yeah. I think the week adding 1 week or 2 weeks to the length of the season is a lot more realistic than saying we're going to split the season into fall and spring and we're going to extend it. That is just inconceivable. That's
not conducive. It doesn't fit in our model, and there are, and it's more so on the women's side than the men's side, but we have it. I share athletes with our baseball and lacrosse coaches. Yeah. So dual sport athlete, like that becomes a thing of the past. And again, these kids aren't on scholarship here. So now we're dictating to them, this is your experience, pick one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, how is that fair to what they're looking for?
Yeah, I totally agree. Hey, do you have any non-negotiables? Do you have any for your team?
Man. Um, I don't know. I don't know that I've necessarily presented it as a non-negotiable, but what we tell our players is, if you're not going to strive to be excellent in everything that you do, why are you doing it? I don't demand, every player is different. My background's in education. I understand that every student learns differently and needs to be taught differently to an extent. I don't expect every one of my kids to be a 4.0 student. I've had kids, and I know student athletes, at both where I work now and where I worked before, that they busted their butts and worked their tails off, and they were a 2.3 student. Yeah. And they gave everything that was their form of excellence, and good for them, and they should be celebrated for that. And then I have we have kids that are 4.0 students, and they work hard for that, and again, they should be celebrated too. But what I tell kids, I said, if you're not going to work hard academically, why are you going to? That's what you're here for. So you have to do that. And if you don't work hard academically, how am I going to be convinced you're going to work hard athletically? And there's a correlation between the two. Strive to be excellent in everything you do. It's a non-negotiable for me. Can you have an off day? Sure. But that doesn't mean you don't work to be the very best you can be in that given day, in that given moment. And I think that covers so much ground when you talk about non-negotiables. Be the best roommate you can be. Socially be the best you can be. In the classroom, are you going to do poorly on an exam at some point? Yeah, probably you are. That's okay. Be better when you come back. Learn from that experience. That's how you can be excellent in what you're doing, even if you didn't perform at your absolute best. So that's really a big thing for me.
Hey, and just from a coaching perspective, during the season, being that it's so tight, how much weight do you put in scouting the other team or preparing for another team, and how much do you do versus how much do you tell your team about?
So it depends on the opponent. I think, there are, especially for conference games, we prepare a lot. I have my assistant coach watching film a week out, starting to put together notes on, this is where we want to try to attack them, this is where we see a weakness, these are things we want to show the guys on film, so they can visualize that. I think one of the areas that we're trying to get better at as a staff is doing more film on ourselves and not just our opponents. This is where we broke down, and this is what, we can show what that, this is going to be a weakness when we play this next team. We have to fix this. But yeah, film is incredibly important for us. Now, there are times, especially if it's a non-conference team and maybe we've got we sense the guys are thinking too much. And they're over-preparing, and their minds are just becoming garbled. Say, hey, we're not going to watch film on these guys. Yeah. We want you to go back to your roots of why you play the game. Let's go out and let's have some fun. Let's not worry about specifics. And that probably goes against what a lot of coaches might say. But again, these are kids still, as much as we call them adults. And they're playing soccer because they enjoy it. So let's stop putting so much pressure to worry about every little detail. And we can still give them some information for sure. Hey, they're going to do this on their set pieces. This guy's left-footed and he's never going to go to his right. Sure, you can tell them that. But we don't need to be worried about all those little things. And it just, you see it with kids. They get overwhelmed. And what do they do when they get overwhelmed? They shut down. So why put them in that situation? So again, it largely depends on the opponent, what we're prepping, what we're trying to do, those sort of things.
I remember as a player, too much information was bad.
Yeah.
I knew what I had to do, and you want me to do make a couple adjustments, got it. But you go beyond that, and I'm like, it would just be too much.
It goes back to, when we talk to our teams at halftime. I know a lot of coaches are always like, oh, yeah, I want 15 minutes. I'm like, I'm good with 10. Yeah. I already know what I want to say to them. I can tell them in about 2 or 3 minutes. Yeah. We're not going to overcomplicate the changes. and then we go. I think that's important, that we recognize we're dealing with kids whose minds are still developing in a highly competitive, highly stressful situation. Our post-game talks, we talk to the kids for about a minute to 2 minutes after every game, and we want to get them out of there. Their minds are fried at that point. We don't need to inundate them with more information. We need to let them recover and prep for what comes next.
Hey, with everything that was going on, right, the year and a half before, what were sort of your expectations going into the fall? I mean, and knowing that there was still some, like, element of, hey, tomorrow we could get shut down. Like, we just don't know.
I think, and I've openly admitted this to my players, I've admitted this to my staff, this fall, and I don't know if other coaches have shared this or have felt this, but this fall, because of that overwhelming feeling, the 800-pound gorilla of COVID that could collapse on you at any moment, it was, we've got to do what we can do to make sure we play games. We got to we're worried about getting to games. And I know for me, and it sounds crazy, like I had 15 years experience, I lost focus on the process. And we suffered because of that. As a program, we suffered, and we didn't achieve as highly as we could have this year. And here I am. I'm willing to admit that. We were so worried about getting shut down, and no, you've got to wear your mask when we get on this visiting campus, and oh my gosh, don't take your mask. And it was, the players were burnt out by it. And it was so difficult. And, we said to ourselves, we're just happy because we're getting to play. And we lost sight of our process that got us to play competitively and be successful. And we didn't have a bad year by any means this year. We were 7-9-1 or 7-9-2. We went to the playoffs. But the experience wasn't what I wanted it to be for our kids. And it was tough, especially for, the 12 outgoing seniors I had to say, hey, guys, I failed you this year, and I'm sorry. And they're like, a lot of them are, no, like, we understand. But it's a lesson for me that here, again, 15 years in, you're still learning, you're still growing as a coach. You have to make it about the process and the experience. And if you're able to do that, you will sustain success. And I think, again, you look at the programs, and again, we talk a lot about the nationally ranked programs that are at the forefront of every conversation, but like those schools, it's tough to break into that group. It's so rare that there's a new school in that top 25 that stays there long, because the process is so hard to maintain.
Yeah. That's a great point. That is there is almost like, if there is one thing is the consistency of those schools is, what are we doing today? Okay, this is the steps that we're taking to be successful today, and then tomorrow, what are we doing today? This is what we're doing to stay successful, and doing that day in, day out, every month, and they're bound to it. And
yes.
And that's how you get that continuity, that's where you reach a level, and then you could stay there.
Yes.
It's very hard. It is very, very hard to do, be that disciplined.
It is. And I look at these guys, and I'm friends with Kyle Desatel at Tufts and Justin at Amherst, and like seeing the work those guys put in.
Yeah.
And again, you have these upstart teams that come in and they make a Cinderella run a little bit. Yeah. But then, especially if they're at smaller schools, a lot of those coaches leave and go somewhere else after a while. Yeah. And so that makes it difficult to maintain. Like, why is Messiah a national power still 15 years after I graduated from college? Well, because Brad took over for Dave, and there's continuity there, and that doesn't always happen. You look at what Jay Martin did. Jay Martin did all those years at Ohio Wesleyan, and you knew there was going to be, it's just going to be different. when someone new outside the program comes in, and it might improve, but there's a transition period.
Yeah.
And so it's just tough.
That's a great point. Continuity. I don't think that word's come up at all, and that is very true. It's like there's got to be some level of continuity if you want to succeed. If school wants to succeed, there has to be a way. Because look, and I look at my alma mater. 3-5 years gone. 3-5 years gone. It's just the way the nature, like the better opportunity, whatever the reasons are.
Right.
It's very hard. It's very hard to build something and keep it built if you're going to leave the next year. It
is, and it's I look at, like I mentioned, Ray Reed earlier, and all the years at UConn. But again, there's a reason UConn was good for all those. Like Ray stayed. You look at what Ian McIntyre is doing at Syracuse. He's not leaving, and he probably could, but this is where I'm going to be, and this is what I'm going to do, and it's and on the women's side, Erica Dombach at Penn State. Like she's had opportunities with women's national team, and she's staying at Penn State. So, but interested. So, and as I bring her up sort of for a specific reason to get a D3 mention in there, her assistant coach Tim Wassel played at Penn State Altoona when I was at Juniata, and he and I were pretty competitive with each other. But again, he's a D3 guy.
Yeah.
And now he's the lead assistant at one of the top women's programs in the country. Yeah. So, but again, there's continuity there, and that's why Penn State is just good year after year after year.
They just reload. That's all they do. They reload every year. Reload. Hey, maybe you could just talk a little bit about your conference, the North Atlantic Conference. I mentioned this at some point. I can't remember where talking to you and us going back and forth just sort of opened up this whole other set of schools that I had, quite frankly, never heard of. Not that I'm surprised by that, but it was, again, up on the East Coast. I'm like, look at all these different schools. So maybe you could just talk about the conference for a little bit and give some color on it.
So the North Atlantic Conference is schools from currently schools from New York, Vermont, and Maine. In 2023, we're adding a school from Massachusetts and another school from New York. So it's 14 schools. On a soccer side, there's an East-West division. Top 4 teams from each division make the playoffs. There's going to be some changes that come in over the next couple of years with us expanding to 14 teams. What those changes are is still being decided. It's geographically, we are spread out. We've got teams in eastern New York, down south of Albany, and us up in northern New York, and teams as far away as Presque Isle, Maine, which is up in the northern it's faster for us to go through Canada than it is to stay in the U.S. to get there. And you have schools like Maine Maritime that are on the Maine Peninsula. So we're absolutely geographically spread out, maybe not quite to the extent of like a UAA, but it covers a pretty wide range. And there were schools in New Hampshire that were in this conference prior to this. So, it's the thing that I like about it is it's a competitive group of schools. And I think as you look across the board, I think really the top 4 or 5 schools on each side are competitive and capable of winning the conference title every year. And that makes for some awesome games, it's fun. Like every game matters, and you're out there and your players are giving everything they've got, which is what you want. There's no, it's not like one team is guaranteed to win it at the outset of the season. It is, traditionally it's a one-bid conference. We're not like the NESCAC where, half the league gets into the to the NCAA tournament, but that's okay. I think while it makes it tough, there is good quality soccer being played, and it's been an enjoyable experience for us. When we first joined our first year in the league, we were the 5 seed in the postseason, and we lost 1-0 in the conference final. The next year we were the 5 seed again. We lost 2-1 in the conference semifinals. So, on a given day, anybody can get there. This past year actually was one of the first years that the 1 seed actually won the conference title since we've been in. I think it's the first year they've won it since we've been in. So yeah, geographically it presents some challenges, but it's schools that are at a similar level. A lot of us play really good quality opponents in our non-conference. The main schools play a number of the NESCAC schools. We play the New York schools. We play a lot of the Liberty League schools. So we're all prepping against the same sort of teams. And it's been a really good fit for us as a college athletic department. From a soccer perspective, I've really enjoyed getting to know a lot of the coaches in the league. And the other cool thing, again, it goes back to the student-athlete experience. How many of our kids in our program would have a chance to travel to northern Maine or eastern Maine in the fall, going through the Green and White Mountains in Vermont and New Hampshire, and seeing what that landscape looks like in the beginning of October? Like that,
Stunning,
that's not
I
something.
bet. Stunning.
What's
must be stunning to play up
Oh,
there in
it's awesome.
October.
And again, they don't get that experience elsewhere. So it's been a really good fit for us, and I've really enjoyed being in the conference.
What are early? I mean, early. I was asking this 6 months ago, or 5 months ago, and it sort of doesn't ring as so. I don't know, like you're foreshadowing. But what are your expectations for the fall?
So,
player wise, I'm
going to be at odds with some people out there when I say this.
Uh-oh. All right, this is recorded. I'm not deleting.
I don't want you to, because I think this is important. With graduating 12 kids this past year, I've been questioned a lot about whether or not this fall is going to be a rebuilding year. This is my personal feeling on this. I think the term and the thought of a rebuilding year is just an excuse to be lazy and not push yourself to be as good as you can be. If there was a period where we were going to rebuild, that would have been this spring, when we increased the expectations on some of the players who sat behind some of those seniors this past year. In this spring, we played 2 games. We tied one. We were down 2-0 at halftime. We came back and tied 2-2. The other game, we won 1-0. And we had a lot of young players who didn't have a lot of game time out there. We adjusted how we played a little bit. This spring is when we rebuilt. And I made that very clear to our incoming freshmen that I expect you to grow quickly and to buy into what we're doing here, because I'm not accepting the term rebuild to be associated with our team this fall. And I think that's different. Where coaches say, "Oh, well, it's going to be a rebuilding year." No, that just means that you're letting that be a crutch and an excuse. We could have said that this was going to be a down year because of COVID. At a certain point, COVID has to stop being a crutch for everyone. We're all living with COVID. It's a part of all of our lives. So let's stop saying, well, this happened because of COVID. Has COVID made things more difficult? 100%. But how many of those same coaches, well, they're using fifth-year players.
Yeah.
COVID's made their life a little bit better. One of my all-conference kids, 2 of my all-conference kids this year, including a first-team all-conference player, were a fifth-year player. So COVID didn't make my life always harder. So stop using it as a crutch. As we go into this fall, you know what? If we don't do our job as coaches to prepare our players, then that's on us. That's not on rebuild or not rebuild. Yes, they're freshmen. Yes, they're inexperienced. But that just means it's our job to help them become experienced. And if we do our jobs correctly, rebuild will not be part of the terminology associated with our program.
No. That's interesting. I'm going to use that for a quick shot. I'm going to cut that out, that part on rebuilding, because that's really interesting.
By all means.
Hey, you mind if we talk a little bit about recruiting?
Sure.
Are you familiar with those websites, like NCS? Do you use those sites? I'm asking all coaches this because they inundate my email.
Yep. So recruiting is a personal experience. Recruiting should be a personal experience. Every person out there has the ability to get themselves recruited. I grew up in an era where there wasn't much in it. Like, I'm sure my college coach somewhere has the VHS of my highlights that I sent him, to date myself slightly. And, you know, I didn't play for a club. I played at a small high school, and I played 3 sports for my high school. The closest club program to where I grew up was an hour away in central New York. In the winter, you don't drive anywhere that's an hour away because you might not get back.
Yeah.
So, you know, for me, club wasn't an option. And I put myself out there. I contacted all the coaches at all the schools I was interested in. Now, these recruiting agencies will sell you on, we'll get you D1 looks. First of all, if a recruiting agency tells you that, run. Because they're selling you on an idea, this D1 or bust mentality.
Yeah.
I have utilized, over my 15 years, I've utilized and gotten emails from just about every recruiting service out there. The only time I really utilize them at this point is when if a kid emails me and doesn't provide a link to highlight video or something, I will Google search them, and generally their recruiting profiles come up and I can pull film from there. But I don't exclusively send stuff out, actively use those websites anymore. We have a really good, we get clubs that send us kids reach out on their own, we reach out to kids when we see them play. And that's really how we've been able to attract the kids that we're going to get anyway. There was a couple of years ago, I emailed 100 kids from Southern California, and I got responses from probably 60 of those kids.
Wow.
You know how many applications I got?
0. 2. Oh, you got yeah.
You know how many on-campus visits I got?
0. Yeah.
You know how many commitments I got?
0.
It just, and again, it depends on the net that you're casting and what kind of, there are coaches out there, and for those of you that, if there are any of you out there that listen to this and you're just trying to build a program and get bodies in, I've been there. God bless you. Man, the grind is real, and you utilize those services for all that they're worth to help get you kids.
Yeah.
But once you've established yourself, I don't think those services are as helpful. Again, I can use them to view film, but I don't contact kids through those services.
Yeah.
I get annoyed when I get the generic mass email when the kid doesn't tell me a single specific thing. It just, there's no personalness to it.
Yeah.
And that's something that I look at when I recruit a kid.
Yeah.
Is there a tie that actually this kid's actually interested in our school?
Yeah.
So that's my take on them.
Yeah. Okay. That seems to be the general consensus. Not really, but if I can see something, but everyone to a T, everyone's like, yeah, I don't like getting those emails where it's like, hey, coach, I look forward to being a Gopher next year, and they're like the Eagles or whatever, like totally wrong.
Yeah,
they're just anyhow.
Yeah, and that, to be fair, it's not to say that coaches don't do that to kids too.
Yeah.
There are coaches.
Oh
that
no,
are,
absolutely, I totally agree.
They're promoting their camps, whatever, and I don't agree with that either.
Yeah.
But again, to each their own.
Yeah.
But again, it's one of those things. Like, how are you establishing a personal relationship with a kid that's actually going to get him to come play for you?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That I agree with. At some point, doesn't matter the service or what have you, it's going to ultimately come down to conversations, right?
Yes.
So, hey, what are your thoughts on all the showcases? Do you go to showcases? Are they useful?
We do. It depends on the showcase. We've established ourselves really well, a good network of club coaches, so we know what events we want to go to. We've found some success finding diamonds in the rough at some smaller events. I was just at an event in Saratoga Springs this past weekend that's not a GOT soccer event.
Oh my gosh!
I know, heaven forbid.
Yeah, you're done. You're out.
I know. Sorry. But it's truly a showcase. Like, there's no tournament format to it. Kids play 2 games each day. But there's a lot of D3 level kids there. Yeah. And that's what it's sort of marketed as. And so we find success in recruiting at that. We like to go, like the big winter event I go to the Massapequa event down on Long Island. That's always got a good level. But ultimately we have to find events that have kids that are going to come to us. So I'm not going to the Academy showcases. I'm not going to ECNL Nationals in Texas or Kansas City or what. Like, I get a kick out of the kid from Syracuse, which is 2 hours away from me, who invites me to come watch him play at Jeff Cup in Richmond, Virginia. I'm like, no, that's not going to happen. I can see you with your club team in Syracuse. I can see you with your high school team in Syracuse. And I get, high school soccer gets a bad name, but there's something to be said for seeing a kid compete with people he's familiar with and that he's grown up with. And guess what? I watch families at those games. Yeah. I'm looking to see what your parents are doing on the sideline. And again, I've seen it happen. Yeah. So there's benefit to doing that too. Mm-hmm. So again, for us, it's not to bash some of those events because there's some really good events out there, but we find the events that suit us and our needs. Mm-hmm. That's really where my focus is at. Right. And again, showcases can do a really good job of that.
Now, you mentioned this, that you have ID camps. Are those important for you and for the players that you're looking to recruit?
Our ID camps are our single most important recruiting resource. We don't run them as, again, we're not, and I don't want to call anybody out, but I can say, I worked for them in the summer. I work the Villanova University ID camps. And part of their marketing to that is they're going to have 60 to 80 college coaches they're watching. And they do, which is great. I mean, you want to talk about exposure. That's awesome. Our ID camp is geared towards the kid who's looking at SUNY Canton, wants an opportunity to work directly with our coaching staff, go through a training session, be coached by us in a way that we coach our kids to find out, is this a fit for me? Mm-hmm. I get to spend some time with the current players and learn about them. And are they guys I'm going to want as teammates? All that's really important to us. So we average 25 guys at our ID clinics. We close them off at 30. I won't register more because I can't get to interact with them and more than that. So we'll have 20 to 30 kids somewhere in that range, and we have, I think all but one of our incoming players were at one of the 2 ID clinics that we offered this past year. Mm-hmm. So they're huge for us. And I think if you go through my roster for the fall, which will be about 28, I would be willing to bet, and I'm going to go count this after we're done, but I bet you at least 22 of them attended one of our ID clinics. So there's a pretty strong correlation between kids that come to it and kids that play for us. Not saying you have to, and sometimes it doesn't work out. The kid on my team from Idaho, it was tough to make those dates match up. So we found another way to make it work and get him in for a visit, and you know what? He's having a great experience here. Yeah. So
all right, I do have to ask, how'd you find a kid out in Idaho?
So this is my one NCSA success story. But here's the thing. But there's an asterisk next to it because he found us on NCSA.
Oh, wow.
But then emailed me not from his NCSA email address, mentioned 2 specific programs, and he mentioned some specifics about our schedule from the previous year. Mm-hmm. So he took the time, did the research, but then didn't do the generic, here's my stuff, coach. Yeah. And he sent me a link to his NCSA profile where I could view his video and everything. So did we utilize NCSA? He found us.
You decide. Yeah.
But again, it wasn't like we specifically targeted him.
Yeah. That's interesting. Idaho. Wow. Okay. All right, so you mentioned high school, and you find some value. Do you like...
Sorry, hold on one second. One of my other coaches just came in. I don't have a Sharpie. I'm sorry. We're good.
Do you talk a little bit about high school soccer? You like going to games? Do you appreciate high school ball?
I do. I think there's value in high school sports as a whole because you don't always have the most skilled kids that's their sport and that's what they're going to do in college. And I think there's value in that and seeing what kind of teammate kids are going to be to those people. I talked about, watching families on the sideline. We go to high school games where we're able to, but we're picky about it, if that makes sense. We want to go see competitive games. We don't want to go see a game that's going to be a 10-0 blowout. My absolute favorite, I had a goalkeeper we were recruiting a few years ago from out by Buffalo, invited me to come see him play. I said, okay, this is a game I can make. Is it going to be worth me coming out to see you play this game? His team won 6-0, and he played the entire second half as a forward.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
And I'm like, I literally saw I saw him warm up.
Yeah.
But even I could tell his warm-up wasn't as focused as it needed to be.
Yeah.
And I drove 5 hours there and back on a weekday.
Yeah.
And it's like, I didn't walk away from that with a very good feeling.
Yeah.
And go figure, we didn't get him anyway, which was fine. But, I think there's some really good high school soccer within a couple hours of us that's really competitive. There's kids that are playing club soccer in some bigger schools, and that makes for a good quality level that we enjoy going to see.
Okay. Last question, and I'll let you get on with your afternoon. So you're recruiting someone, a high school kid. What are some of the things that you're telling them about what he's going to have to learn or what he's going to have to adjust to when he comes to school and walks onto the field for the first time in August?
So there's a couple of things. Physicality and speed of play are drastically different. Unless these kids have been playing, the national level with ECNL, MLS Next, which there aren't a ton of those kids in the D3 game. We have one coming in the fall, but two coming in the fall, but generally it's not the case. What's a foul in high school and in club isn't always a foul in college. The pace of the game, your decision making has to be much faster. But I think, the big trap that kids coming into college fall into is, I'm going to college and I've got to change everything that I do because it's more physical, because it's faster paced. I've got to change everything. And I had a call with my incoming kids the other night, and I said, one thing you guys have to remember, you were all recruited here for a very specific reason. You bring something to the table with your current skill set and who you are as a player that adds value to our program. Why would you change that? We recruited you for that. Don't go trying to reinvent the wheel on us here. Will your role change? Absolutely. If you go around any college soccer room and ask kids to raise their hand if they were the best player on their high school or club team, every single hand goes up.
Yeah.
So yes, roles are going to change. Positions might change. Playing time changes, sure. And it's new teammates around you. So some areas where you might have had to do things in the past, you don't have to do them now. And, all that matters. But don't completely change who you are just because soccer itself doesn't change. One of the things that I love, it's a simple game, and we overcomplicate the crap out of it in this country. Yeah. And not just, everywhere. It just gets overcomplicated because a lot of times we overthink things. I'm training, I run sort of private training sessions during the summer, and I'm training a 14-year-old women's goalkeeper right now. Mm-hmm. And I said to her the other day, she had a couple of bad reps, and it led to a couple more bad reps. And I said, hey, remember that bad rep 5 minutes ago? Yeah, why? Stop remembering it. Go to the next one. Focus on what's right in front of you. And I think that's a really important lesson for kids going out of college. Is there's going to be a learning curve. There's going to be bumps in the road. Don't let one bad day, one bad session just bring everything down around you.
Yeah.
It can get better in a heck of a hurry, but you got to roll with the punches. You have to let yourself be coachable. And the last thing I'll say in it, I tell my guys this all the time: be willing to be wrong. Because if you're wrong, we can fix it. Yeah. If you're right, we can celebrate it. But if you're indecisive and make no decision whatsoever, we can't push you either way. Yeah. So be willing, have the confidence to make a mistake. Make the mistake in practice. Like that first day of preseason, you see all the incoming kids, they're so uptight, they don't want to make a mistake, and I'm like, stop it. Yeah. Like, you're going to make a mistake. Notice how I didn't yell at you. Yeah. Let's move forward here. Like, it's okay. Yeah. So, no, I think those are all things that are really important for kids when they make this transition. They've got to remember that. Yeah.
All right, Coach. So I'm going to take like your information, camp, whatever I can glean, and I'll put it in the description below.
Great.
But thank you very much for the time. This is up there in terms of length of discussion. So you know it's good.
Thanks for humoring me and not cutting me off.
No, not at all. Hey, you know what? Like I said, I've yet to pull the axe, right? Like I've never. It sits in the corner.
I appreciate getting to do this and getting a chance to sort of tell my experience. I'm working right now on starting a podcast with my former college coach. Actually, we kind of want to talk about some of these things a little bit more in depth. And, but no, I appreciate the opportunity. I'm so glad you're doing this. I appreciate all the coaches that have done this already, that have set the stage, and the coaches that are going to do this after me. Like, enjoy getting to do this because we get to talk about what we love doing, and it's a heck of a lot of fun.
And I enjoy doing it. So, like I said, you keep me entertained. You know, like it's an audience of one as far as I'm concerned, right? Like, hey, this is great.
This is fun for me. I love doing it, and it's funny. The recruit that was here before we talked today, I found out. Part of the reason he came to our ID clinic back in May was I had done the Discover College Soccer interview, and they saw that interview, and I told him I was doing this one, and the dad's like, yeah, we'll be watching that.
Yeah.
So I think it's really, but again, it gives us a chance to have a voice and to be seen outside the realm of we're on the sideline recruiting and talk about our programs and what we think.
Yeah. It's so much. It's so much deeper, right? Like there's so much more depth to, every coach that I've talked to. You know what you think on the outside is probably not even superficial to what's going on really in the world that you live, right? Like there's so much more detail. There's so much more stuff you're having to deal with. So much more information you're processing, and all the while you're trying to build a team and a program and. I found, total respect for you guys, and one of these days I will join the ranks again. So,
hey, there's always room.
Yeah. So, all right, Coach.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.